Welcome to Wonderland, the podcast where I go down the rabbit hole to research things you may be curious about. My name is Amii, and I'll be your guide on this trip to Wonderland. Hi there, my Wonderlings. It's officially spring here in Columbia, South Carolina, and I've been busy doing spring things like planting my garden, cleaning up my yard, and just generally enjoying being outside. I love the longer days, and my soul feels so happy as everything comes back to life around me. But there's one part of spring that I don't necessarily love.
Daylight savings time.
Fall back or move forward.
Daylight savings.
Time change.
Ever wonder why we decided to meddle with time twice a year? I did, and that's exactly the rabbit hole we're going down today.
I wonder.
I wonder. I wonder.
I wonder.
I wonder.
I wonder.
I wonder.
I wonder.
I wonder.
Twice a year we adjust our clocks, but when exactly does that happen?
Fall and spring.
It happens usually now in March and November. It used to be that it was the beginning of April and the end of October. And before that, it was the middle of October and the middle of April.
In the spring and the fall each year. Oh, I was thinking like midnight.
So what were you thinking?
Midnight, spring and fall. On a specific day. Oh my God.
You may be familiar with the phrases spring forward and fall back. And this helpful mnemonic device used to remember whether to move the clocks forward an hour or back an hour can likely be attributed to the Heppner Gazette Times in Heppner, Oregon on October 28, 1928. They reportedly published a reminder to their citizens. Daylight savings time ends this Sunday, October 31st. Remember to set your clocks back 1 hour. Spring forward, fall back. That is to say that in the spring, we move our clocks forward by 1 hour. So what was 5 a.m. is now 6 a.m. In the fall, we move them back to standard time. So what was once 5 a.m. is now 4 a.m. The change is supposed to occur at 2 a.m. And in the United States, at least currently, daylight savings begins on the second Sunday of March and ends on the first Sunday in November. We'll get into why we have time change, but first, let's talk about when we first started this practice. When did we start observing time change?
I don't know.
1600s. I'm going to say early 1900s.
The 1940s, 1950s.
Officially, Americans began observing daylight savings time in 1918 with the passing of the Calder Act, or Standard Time Act. Technically, this act is what sets time zones in the U.S. and authorized the Interstate Commerce Division to define limits of time zones. When the act passed, it also included a section for daylight saving as a wartime measure, which starts to get us to the why. So, why do we observe daylight saving?
For some reason, there are historians that say that this was something that was coming up that was created by Benjamin Franklin for farmers so that they could increase or they could do something about the time when it came to farming and harvesting and something like that in the during the harvest period
For the farmers.
Well, we talked about this yesterday, and we both decided that we both thought it was something to do with farming, and
when like harvests and all were to allow for, more harvesting time, more seeding time when it was that time of year, whatever, farming reasons.
I've also read that it had something to do with the electrical companies wanting to conserve or try and limit the amount of electricity that was being used in the dusk hours. So the time would move forward so that people would stay outside longer or do things outside without using electricity in the house, potentially a conservation situation.
As I mentioned, in the United States, daylight saving was enacted as a wartime measure in the 20th century. Its intent was to maximize daylight hours and reduce fuel consumption. But the concept of daylight saving could arguably date all the way back to ancient Rome. The ancient Romans had a very interesting way of keeping time. Essentially, All daylight hours were divided into 12 hours, but the number of minutes in an hour varied depending on the month. So, for example, the third hour after sunrise started at 2:09 solar time and lasted 44 minutes during the winter solstice. But during the summer solstice, it began at 6:58 and lasted 75 minutes. Thankfully for us all, these uneven hours began phasing out by the 14th century and were replaced by even-length civil hours. Maybe you've heard that good old Benjamin Franklin, who believed
early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise,
is the man behind daylight saving. While it is true that he published a satirical letter in the Journal de Paris in 1784 in which he suggested Parisians economize on candles by rising earlier to use the morning sunlight, Franklin did not propose daylight saving. In fact, many countries did not even keep precise schedules. The man we can all curse when we lose an hour of sleep was an entomologist from New Zealand named George Hudson. Hudson had a shift work job, which gave him time to collect insects after he got off of work. He valued these daylight hours after the end of his shift, and in 1895, he presented a paper to the Wellington Philosophical Society proposing a 2-hour daylight saving shift. While there was considerable interest in the proposal, it was not actually enacted in New Zealand at that time. Meanwhile, halfway across the world in England in 1907, an avid golfer by the name of William Willett independently also came up with the concept of daylight saving after he recognized how many Londoners slept through a large part of a summer day. This, coupled with Willett's general disdain for having to cut a round of golf short at dusk, proposed advancing the clock forward during the summer. While Parliament did take the proposal and introduce a daylight saving bill to the British House of Commons in 1908, the bill failed and was not enacted into law in England during Willett's lifetime. Across the pond, however, Port Arthur in Ontario, Canada, would become the first city in the world to enact daylight saving time on July 1st, 1908. Meanwhile, the first countries to enact daylight saving time were those in the German Empire and its World War I ally, Austria-Hungary, on April 30th, 1916. The reason they enacted the measure was to conserve coal during wartime. They were quickly followed by Britain and its allies, and many neutral European nations. Russia adopted daylight saving in 1917, and the United States enacted daylight saving in 1918. Largely, most countries did away with daylight savings after the war ended, with the notable exceptions of Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Ireland, and the United States. The world has seen daylight saving time enacted and repealed many times. During World War II, many countries readopted it. In 1966, the U.S. standardized it with a federal law, and most of Europe adopted daylight saving in the 1970s due to an energy crisis. So the idea came about for bug collecting and golf, and was enacted to save commodities during war. But I'm sure plenty of people have heard that daylight saving was implemented for farmers. In actuality, farmers are one of the strongest lobbying groups against daylight saving since it was implemented. Essentially, the things that impact farming schedules, such as morning dew or when a cow is willing to be milked, are ultimately determined by the sun, so the change in clock introduces unnecessary challenges to farmers. So we know that we observe daylight saving time in the United States, but does it happen everywhere in the world?
No. Well, based on my experience with coworkers that live in India, time change doesn't happen in India. Indiana, in the United States, doesn't change times. There are parts of the Navajo Nation in Arizona that don't change.
Here, Canada.
South Korea. So no.
I think it's primarily U.S. I don't know that anybody in Canadian countries or South American countries do it. I don't think so.
We've discussed that at some point, many countries have enacted and repealed daylight saving time. As of 2023, fewer than 40% of the countries in the world apply time changes, although more than 140 countries have implemented them at some point. And not all places in a country may observe daylight savings. For example, in the United States, most of Arizona and Hawaii adhere to permanent standard time. Conversely, Saskatchewan and Yukon in Canada have adopted permanent daylight saving time. The European Union countries, the United States, Canada, Paraguay, Chile, Cuba, Haiti, part of Austria, and New Zealand make the change to their clocks twice a year still. Too bad Hudson didn't get to live for this. Some people are in favor of time changing to take advantage of the daylight in our schedule-driven world, but others would prefer that we set the clock and leave it there permanently. What are your thoughts? Are you a fan?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say just get rid of it.
No.
Why?
I don't know.
You don't like losing that hour of sleep?
But you gain an hour of sleep.
So you're neutral?
No, I don't like gaining sleep.
I am not. But I'm also not a fan of there being 2 Dakotas.
And why aren't you a fan of daylight savings?
I think it's unnecessary. I don't think there's a necessity to switch times or change times during the year any longer.
I like it when I get the extra
Yeah.
sleep hour.
Yeah.
And then I don't like it when I lose a sleep hour. So I'm a complete wash.
Me? As much as I hate losing the hour of sleep each spring, I definitely prefer to enjoy as much daylight as possible. So I guess that makes me a fan. Let me know your thoughts on daylight saving time by interacting on social media or by sending me an email. So there we have it, friends. We've already sprung forward for the year, and the next time we change the clocks, we get to enjoy an extra hour of sleep. Except for my wonderlings in Arizona, like Ashley Oliver. Hi, Ashley. Thanks for joining me down this rabbit hole. And until next time, be safe, be kind, and stay curious. The Welcome to Wonderland podcast is copyrighted by Amii Bland and is part of Big Media. This podcast is recorded in the podcast studio at GOT Sound Studio in Lexington, South Carolina, but this episode was recorded in the Welcome to Wonderland recording closet. Any thoughts or opinions expressed as part of this production are those of the hostess unless otherwise indicated. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast. Please follow, like, and share this podcast. Find us on Facebook at Welcome to Wonderland the Podcast and on X, the app formerly known as Twitter, at Wonderland_pod. Check out behind-the-scenes moments and other videos on TikTok at Wonderland Pod. And finally, check out pictures, additional information, and go further down the rabbit hole on our website at www.wtwlpod.com. To submit corrections, additional information, or requests for episodes, please email the hostess at welcometowonderlandthepod@gmail.com. Are you ready? Yum, 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 yum. For spaghetti. Yum, 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 yum. Ready?
Ready, Freddie?
The preceding podcast is a product of Big Media and copyright 2024, all rights reserved. Hey everyone, it's Barrett from the All About Nothing podcast, and what the pod was that to tell you that Everplay Sports and Social League summer registration is open now through May 22nd for the following sports: Tuesday dodgeball, Super Rec kickball on Tuesdays, Wednesday and Thursday kickball, Monday and Tuesday indoor volleyball, Tuesday and Thursday outdoor volleyball, Sunday and Monday softball, Thursday cornhole, Wednesday soccer, and Monday pickleball. Registration is also open now through August 22nd for the Friday, August 23rd Masters of Putt-Putt at Frankie's Fun Park in Columbia. Winners will take home koozies, pictures with a trophy and banner, as well as a donation made to the charity of their choice. Register now, Everplay Sports and Social League. Visit everplaysocial.com for details and registration. Everplay Sports and Social League. Socialize, play, and have fun.